My child isn't talking yet, but he can sing songs or repeat lines or scripts from movies. Or my child simply repeats what everyone else says. These are the kinds of things that I hear from parents of children who are learning language differently. See, it turns out there's two main ways that children learn language. Some children learn language one word at a time, while other children learn language in chunks by repeating whole sentences or even full scripts that they have heard elsewhere. And these children are called Gestalt Language Processors. I am speech language pathologist Carrie Clark, and on today's episode of the Speech and Language Kids podcast, I'm going to share my top 6 steps for helping those Gestalt language processors find their voice. Now, this is a topic that I have been getting a lot of questions about lately, and some of that is because of the content that I have been posting over on speechandlanguagekids.com, so I wanted to make sure that we talked about it here on the podcast because GLPs or Gestalt Language Processors, this is a thing that I had been seeing for years and didn't have the words to describe what it was that I was noticing. And so as soon as I started to hear this terminology and hear people discussing this type of child, it really clicked for me. And so it's not something new in terms of a new behavior that we're seeing in children. It's that we're starting to recognize it, which is really super fun. And basically, we're saying that there's nothing wrong with these kids. It's not that there's a problem. It's that they're learning language differently. And if we acknowledge that, then we can look at different strategies that will better support these students, okay? So if you would like to see any of the show notes or the links that I'm going to talk about on today's podcast episode, you can go to speechandlanguagekids.com/GLP-podcast, all right? Okay, also don't forget to check out the Speech and Language Kids Hub if you haven't done that yet. I have added a ton of new content over the last couple of weeks. We have new therapy plans for a whole bunch of skills such as multiple meaning words, narratives, temporal and quantitative concepts, and I even just did a therapy plan for cluttering, which is a type of disfluency. And so we've got lots of really good new stuff in there. Also, we have courses and kits for our GLPs as well. So if you want to learn more about Gestalt Language Processors and how to support them, we've got all that inside the Hub as well. And I also am live inside the Hub right now as I'm doing this recording. So welcome to all of you who are with me live, and thank you for working through some tech issues with me at the beginning, but hopefully we'll be able to get through this. All right, Lauren, I see that you're wanting links, and I'll give you those at the end of this because that link that I just mentioned isn't live yet. It will be live once this goes out for the recording. Okay. All right, so you know I love to start with a story, and the story I want to tell today is about my own children's first words. So my older son, James, his first word was up because he loved being held, he loved being picked up, and he always wanted to cuddle. Now, my younger son is 2.5 years younger than his brother. So by the time he was starting to talk, I had a 3-year-old who was always on the move, never stopped. And so my youngest son was always in the baby carrier or the wrap or in some way attached to my body. And his first word was down. So I love that my oldest was up and my youngest was down. And that perfectly described them at that age. But that is not the only way that children learn language. They don't always learn it one word at a time. First word stories are really fun, but sometimes your first word is, I walked my dog in Kansas City last night. True story. That was one that I know. And so sometimes they come out as whole chunks or whole phrases or even whole scripts that they've heard somewhere. So I'm going to give you the example of Michael, who I've changed his name, but that's one of the clients that I had, and he did something else, okay? So I was playing with Michael in one of our play therapy sessions. He was a new client to me. I had picked up his school, and so was helping out to get those minutes met in this school. And he loved the little Marble Works tower that has the little tracks that you drop the marbles down, and you can build different tracks. And so we were playing with that. And I had the marbles, and he was reaching for them. And so I said, "Do you want it?" And he immediately said, "Do you want it?" And that is called echolalia. So echolalia is when they repeat back what you said immediately after you say it, okay? So I gave him the marbles and I modeled the language I wanted him to use, and then he did it again and put the marbles down again. And so then I picked up the marbles and held them in my hand and just waited. And then he said, "Do you want it?" And that, my friends, is delayed echolalia. So I hadn't said it that time, but he remembered that the last time I was holding it, that's what I said. So he's tying this chunk of language to the meaning that is, you have the marbles and now I want the marbles and here's what I say, okay? So that's delayed echolalia. Now, he also had delayed echolalia that lasted longer than just a couple of seconds in between rounds, right? One of my favorite ones that he would do is every time he would cough or sneeze, he'd go, "Goodness, dude," which was exactly like it sounded when his teacher said that after one time that he coughed or sneezed. And so he just associated those two things. You sneeze, you say "goodness, dude" in that super funny voice, and I loved it. He would also, though, repeat full lines or scripts from videos that he'd watched, from an electronic toy that he had where, you push the button and it says E is for elephant, or whatever it was. And so he would repeat those things as well. Okay. So he was a Gestalt language processor and therefore was learning language differently than my little ones who learned their words one at a time. And also requires different strategies to support him when he's struggling with language development. So this is what I want to talk about today, is these GLPs, these Gestalt Language Processors, how they're learning language and how we can support them, okay? So a Gestalt language learner is a child who is learning language in chunks or in scripts that are known as Gestalts. And that comes from a German word meaning whole. They are whole pieces. So they may repeat entire phrases or sentences or scripts that they have heard from other places. And these scripts, these chunks, still have meaning to them, but it may not be the same meaning as the specific words would lead you to believe, right? So let's see. For example, let's say that the child is singing or saying, either one, "Do you want to build a snowman?" Okay, and we know, that script came from the Frozen movie. We understand that. That's where it came from. But when the child says it, it's not that they actually want to go build a snowman. It's probably something to do with what was happening when they heard it. So maybe they watched that movie with grandma and they're actually asking you where grandma is, but they're doing it by saying, "Do you want to build a snowman?" So what we end up getting to do is we get to become detectives and we get to say, okay, I hear this chunk of language. I know where it's from, or maybe I don't know where it's from. I know what the words mean, but I don't think that's what the child means. And trying to put the meaning behind it. Because sometimes when a child is just repeating back what they hear from us or from others, it feels like it's not meaningful. It feels like they're just repeating to be repeating. But if we dig a little deeper, a lot of times we will find that they really are trying to communicate something or trying to connect with us, okay? So that's the really fun part, is trying to figure out what's going on. It can also be extremely frustrating, don't get me wrong, but that can be really fun once you start to have these aha moments and start to figure this out. Okay, so let's talk about some signs that a child might be a GLP, and then we'll go into some of these strategies. So here's where it gets tricky. If the child isn't speaking much or isn't speaking at all, it can be really hard to tell which way they're learning language. But the strategies we use are different for the two different types of kids. And here's another tricky part. Sometimes they do a little bit of both. So if you're totally not sure, just model all of the strategies and see which ones they respond to. But here are some signs that you might be working with a GLP, and therefore you might want to model more language chunks as you're doing therapy or working with your own child at home, instead of modeling just single words. Because we know if a child is learning language one word at a time, then giving them single words is more effective. Okay, so here are some signs you might be working with a GLP. If they have a melodic way of speaking with a lot of variation and intonation, even if you can't understand the words. So this is where a lot of times I hear parents say, "Oh, well, he's singing or he's he's doing jibber jabber, but there's no actual real words, but they're doing that. And so it sounds like speech. It has the intonation of speech, maybe even a little exaggerated, but it doesn't have the speech sounds. And a lot of times what we find when we really start to listen and dig in is we find that those are actual English language or whatever language they're speaking. Those are actual chunks of the language that they heard somewhere, but their mouth and their articulators are not quite sophisticated enough to get those sounds out. So our GLPs are more tuned into how language sounds than the meaning. And so individual speech sounds not as important to them as the melodic intonation and the flow, right? Which is why our GLPs tend to be really good at imitating curse words because curse words have a lot of emotion and a lot of inflection and a lot of variation in pitch and loudness, and they're very exciting to listen to. So if you have a kiddo who's doing that, that might be a tune in as well. All right. Our GLPs also tend to say things the same way every time. So you might hear them say, do you want it? Do you want it? Every time. Do you want it? And that it's that same intonation each time they say it. They may like to sing songs. A lot of times our GLPs are really into music. They may love categories of language like farm animals or shapes or letters or numbers. So when I hear a parent say, hey, my kid knows all his shapes and letters and numbers, but he's not speaking yet, and, like not using words to communicate with us, that's a sign for me that this might be a GLP. Because things like, oh, this is an A, this is a C, those are very concrete and easy to associate meaning to, whereas natural speech is much harder. Okay, so they may really lean into those categories of language. And then they also may like to play the same way every time or reenact things that they've seen on movies or screens. They like it to go a certain way. I mean, a lot of kids do, right? But they tend to, if they're playing, they're going to act out the same way every time. Just like they love that rhythm, right? Whether it's through language or whether it's through play. Okay, those of you who are in here with me live in the hub, let's make sure our audio is still working. This is an audio check-in. So pop over to the chat. Tell me if this is making sense. Do you have any questions? What are you thinking about this? All right. Okay, so let's go into some of the strategies then. So when we are working with our GLPs, there are certain strategies that we can use that will help us help them. Okay. And sometimes these strategies are going to look different than our children who are learning language one word at a time. But again, remember, if you're not sure, you can do some of these strategies and some of the modeling one word at a time strategies. You can do a little bit of both because some kids also learn both ways. They're dual language processors, just to make it nice and confusing. Okay. So here are our strategies we're going to talk about for GLPs. Thank you, May and Madeline, for giving me the thumbs up, letting me know it's working. Okay. GLP strategy 1 is to become a detective. And I talked about this a little bit already, but often those gestalts that the child is saying are trying to convey a meaning. We have the do you want to build a snowman, not about snowmen at all. They're trying to communicate something else. So we need to pay attention to the things the child is saying and try to guess what the actual meaning may be. And even if we're not sure, we should still respond to the child as though we understood and as though they conveyed a meaning to us. These scripts are communication, and we need to respond to the child to let them know that we understand that they're trying to connect with us, even if we don't understand what they're trying to say. And so the easiest way to do that is just to mirror back to them. Whatever they said, you say it too, and try to make it sound exactly like they said it. And then just watch. Do they look up at you when you say the things that they're saying? Are they completely tuned out and oblivious to you? Figure out how they're responding, and then you'll start to notice some differences and some nuances to, oh, if I say things this way, they respond more. Or if I say things that way, or if I repeat what they say, right? And all the while, we're just trying to figure out what they might be saying. We can think about the types of videos or shows they're watching, because here's the thing. In a video, if you play it over and over again, it sounds exactly the same way every time you play it. Whereas if an adult says something, they're going to say it a little bit differently each time, and that doesn't get locked in as well as a video. So sometimes our GLPs learn language better from videos than they do from communicating with an adult. Now, that doesn't mean that we should just stick them in front of videos and never communicate with them. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying if you do know some of those videos they've been watching, listen for some of those pieces, okay? All right, so that was GLP strategy 1, become a detective. And then GLP strategy 2 is to follow the child's lead and imitate. Okay, so therapy for this group of kids is not drill and practice. It is not, what is that called? I don't know. It's not a call and response. It's not I'm telling you have to do this, and then in exchange you can have what you want instead. That is not what this therapy is about. This therapy is about building relationships. This therapy is about connecting with a child on their level, in their way, and helping them know that we are willing to come into their world. They don't have to make it to ours. We'll come to them, okay? So it's about letting the child lead the play or lead the interaction, and all we're doing is modeling language along the way. We're not demanding anything of them. We're not asking them to do anything. We are just letting them be them, and we are supporting them by providing language along the way. So we're going to imitate what the child does, movements, and what they say. Any of those little sound effects, we're going to imitate those. And we're going to respond to their communication, even if we don't understand. Because by doing that, we're saying, hey, I'm here with you. I hear you. I see you. I know what you're doing, and I want to be a part of it. Okay? It's super easy. This therapy is fun. It might feel at first like you're not doing anything if you're used to a more structured therapy, but I promise you, you are. You are connecting with them, you are getting into their world, and you are showing them the way to communicate back to you. Okay? So that's GLP strategy 2, follow their lead and imitate. GLP strategy 3 then is to use statements and silence. Silence is key. Because remember, we said our GLPs are tuned into how language sounds. So they grab a chunk of language by listening for the pauses on either end. If you've ever heard a child script an entire scene from a movie where they go from start to finish and do the whole thing, it's because there were no pauses in there. That is one chunk for them. And they are not yet capable of breaking that down into smaller pieces. They will later. That's how this works. But for right now, they're listening for those pauses, and that's how they know, oh, there's a beginning and end. This is a chunk. I will capture that chunk and stick it in my brain, right? So if we model simple sentences with silence on either end, then we are giving them a chunk that's more manageable for them to hold on to, okay? So if I wanted to say it's snack time to this child, I don't say, okay, Johnny, it's snack time. Now we're going to eat some crackers, because now that's one chunk, right? So I'm going to make a pause. It's snack time. And I'm going to pause again, okay? So by providing silence on either end, you're delineating what that chunk is for them. And then you're also giving them an opportunity to respond, to repeat you in any way, in any sort of interaction, in whatever way it looks like to them, okay? So using those silences is really important. We should not have a running log, a dialogue of speech that just keeps going and going and going. Pauses and simple statements. Okay? GLP strategy 4 then is playing with our pitch and our emotion. All right? So they are going to pick up on phrases and scripts that are full of excitement, full of emotion, have a lot of variability in their pitch from highs to lows. And this is because they're tuned into the intonation of the pitch of what is said, which is why a lot of times if you're listening to those scripts, you'll start to pick up the intonation before you'll pick up the actual words. Okay? So when we're talking, try varying your pitch from high to low. That's more fun. That's going to stick with them better than something that's a more monotone statement. So instead of saying, it's snack time, we're going to say, it's snack time. And we're giving it that fun, that variability, okay? And then watch. See if they start to tune in when you use more variability. I have also had parents tell me that they have had success with singing to their child. So if there's a certain transition that has a little tune you can sing with it, everybody knows the cleanup song. Things like that, they might tune in better to having something sung to them instead of having it spoken, okay? So play around with that. See what they respond to. See what they like, okay? I had a little guy, I think it was the same one I was just talking about, and he really liked this one song that I did, and I kind of used it to work on action words, but it was really more of a connection thing. But we'd say, walking, 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 hop, 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 running, 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 now we stop, now we stop. And that was the song we did whenever we were walking to speech. And we would do the actions, right? We'd walk, and then we'd hop, and then we'd run our feet really fast, and then we'd stop. And it was a chance for us to practice those movements and have this fun connection that we got to have on the way to speech. And so when I would come pick him up to take him to speech, he'd start to say, walking, walking, and he would sing it with me. And it was so fun. Okay, so play with pitch, play with emotion, play with music, make it fun. All right, 2 more strategies. GLP strategy number 5 then is modeling gestalts that will be easy to use later. So let me explain that. Once a child has a large enough bank of these gestalts that they can say and that they can use in various situations, they're going to start being able to break those apart. First, they'll break it down into shorter gestalts. Then eventually they'll break it all the way down to single words. And then they'll start pulling out the single words from those gestalts that they practiced before. And then, here's the magic. Then they'll start to be able to combine a single word from this gestalt with a single word from this gestalt and put them together to make a new utterance that they've never said before. And that is super, super fun, okay? So that's the big picture. This can take years to do. Some kids do it in months. Some kids are super fast. Some kids need some more time. It doesn't matter. What matters is that if we know this is the trajectory that these children are on, then we can start to plant the seeds of some gestalts that we think will be more helpful for them later. So that either means gestalts that they're going to be able to use in more than one situation, right? Like, do you want to build a snowman? Unless somebody knows what you're trying to say, sounds like you just want to build a snowman. So if we give them some gestalts they can use in lots of situations, then they can use that meaning multiple times. But then also gestalts that we know are going to be easier to break down and pull pieces from later, okay? So we are going to start modeling these, again, with our silence on either end. And I have some examples for you on the show notes. So remember, if you need to find that after this recording goes live, then you can go to speechandlanguagekids.com/GLP-podcast. Or if you're in here with me in the Hub Live, we actually have a kit for this that I'll show you. But yeah, so you're going to model sentences like, I'm thinking about, right? So I'm thinking about lunch. I'm thinking about a movie. And that gives them something that later they can mix and match, or maybe they can use in multiple situations. I'm ready to. Let's go. Let's eat. Let's get our shoes on. The let's is a really powerful one. Can be used in a lot of things. We're going to the park. We're going to school. It's time to. Where's mommy? Where's Johnny? Look at the, and how about we? And so we are using these when we're talking in hopes that they will repeat them and add them to their repertoire so that they can then use those later to mix and match, which GLP strategy number 6 then is mixing and matching gestalts. Okay, so remember how I said we're going to break those down? Once the child gets better at using these gestalts to communicate, then we can start modeling mixing and matching parts, okay? So 2 ways we can do this. We can shorten long gestalts, and we can recombine smaller chunks to create new utterances. So let's say they have a Gestalt that's up above the world so high, and that's their Gestalt, and they do the whole thing. Then maybe we model so high, and we're just modeling that last piece. And we're showing them, you don't have to do the whole thing. You can pull a chunk. And we're giving them that model, okay? So shortening the longer ones to a shorter chunk. Or we can recombine smaller chunks to create new utterances. So let's say that they have two Gestalts that they say a lot. That one of them is, let's get out of here. And another one is, want some more? And so we model, let's get some more. And we're putting those pieces together so that they can see how that works. Okay? Now, if you have a child or a client who is just starting to imitate some Gestalts, you don't have to focus on the mix and match yet. We can do that later. But I wanted to give you that whole kind of system because that's where we're heading. And if you know that, then again, you can model things that are going to be a little easier to do that with later. Okay. All right. So if you are looking to learn more about Gestalt Language Processors, we have a ton of resources inside the hub. We have courses, we have those therapy plans and therapy kits. We've got handouts, we've got so much more. So join us inside the hub. We have our resources there. If you go to hub.speechandlanguagekids.com, I think we have a couple of things in the freebie plan, but most of those resources are available inside the full hub membership, which you do have to pay for. It's $25 a month or $250 a year, but we do have a free trial if you want to kind of poke around and see what's there before you commit. But you can go over there and sign up for that, and we have all of those resources in there. Plus, we've got the community, so you can pop in and ask questions. You can send me direct messages and ask me private questions if you'd like to do that. And we'll help you through because it's a really cool strategy that I find very empowering because, like I said, I was seeing this. I was seeing kids learning language this way, but I didn't have words for it and I didn't have a therapy path, right? I didn't know how to support them in their way of learning. And so now that we have this, I love it. And I feel like this is going to help so many kids. So come on over to the hub and we'll help you figure out how to do this. It's really fun. And then, of course, if you have questions, you can leave those on the show notes as well, and we'll answer them there as well. Okay. All right. That's it for today. Thank you all for joining me. Thank you for those of you in here with me live, and we'll see you all inside the hub or next week. What's our one for next week? Oh, I just put it up. No, I can't remember. All right. Well, check inside the hub. I've got the event scheduled already, and we'll see you next week on the next podcast episode. Bye. Bye, Sophie Ann. Bye, Radhika. Bye. All right. See you guys later.